Servus and hello. Matthias here, and this is Singletrack. All right. Last weekend was Rock Candy Running's little backyard adventure 6-hour race. And man, it was a blast. 6 hours, 4-mile loop, twisty trails in a beautiful forest right in Olympia. So much fun to cheer all the runners pushing themselves to reach new limits. But now we're back in the Singletrack global headquarters, and I'm excited to take you all back to Germany, Bavaria to be precise. And we also travel to Squamish, BC. This place keeps coming up, right? Our guest on today's show is Steve Auch, German trail runner and lover of North American trail races. We chat about the differences between trail racing in Europe and North America, and what Steve loves about races over here, and why he not just keeps coming back, but also bringing more and more of his friends with him to run the Squamish 50, the Rut, and Whistler Alpine Meadows. Steve's dream race, wait for it, Western States, and he's patiently waiting to finally get drawn in the lottery to run his ultimate race. But enough with the intro. Steve, welcome to Singletrack. Steve Auch, you are on Singletrack. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Matthias. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. So you were calling in from southern Bavaria. Am I capturing this right?
Yes, that's right. It's a small city called Bad Reichenhall, and it's located directly on the German-Austrian border next to Salzburg.
So for listeners of the show, Hannes Namberger is a cop in the area. Is that fairly close? If you drive too fast, could it be that he pulls you over?
Yes, that could be. Hannes lives, I think, 20 minutes away from here.
Okay, fantastic. So what is also interesting, and is also a big theme of this podcast and probably of larger Germany, is that you didn't actually grow up in Bavaria, but you moved to Bavaria to be closer to the mountains. Tell us a little bit, where are you from originally and what brought you to the Alps?
Yeah, I grew up in the middle of Germany, next to Frankfurt. I think Frankfurt is a city a lot of people should know in the US. And in 2009, at the age of 26, I moved to Bavaria, caused by my job. I'm a soldier at the German army, and I had the chance to move to get a deployment down there in Bavaria. And I said, hey, okay, that sounds great. That's a very nice area. I knew the area from vacations with my parents, and I said, okay, if not now, take it.
Yeah, for sure. Do I remember this correctly, that for the German army, being close to the mountains is sort of the most prestigious place to be in the army because of the kind of skills that you're learning in mountain training?
Absolutely. It's much
right?
Much better than the Air Force or the Navy.
Well, there you hear it, right? There's some very interesting similarities to the American military too. So you've moved to Bavaria and you got stuck there. The Swabians would call you then a Reingeschmackter. What did the Bavarians call that?
Saupreis. Because I'm not originally from Bavaria. And so everybody's a Saupreis.
That is amazing. That's fantastic. Okay, so you're down there. Are you still with the military now?
Yes. I'm a professional soldier.
Okay.
For the next, I think, still 16 or 18 years. So the rest of my life.
Well, nice. And I think, well, I mean, unfortunately, the reason for it is not, and that goes a little bit far beyond the topic of this podcast, if you will. But even though the reason of what Putin is doing isn't a positive thing, the sentiment somewhat is changing in Germany, right? Because I mean, when I was in Germany, we were so anti-military, anti-army. We were sort of happy to close our eyes and let the Americans do the dirty work, but the German military wasn't really being well regarded, right?
Yes, that's right. In Bavaria, it's not that big problem because there's the military in Bavaria has a very close link to all the citizens in Bavaria. But if you compare to other parts of Germany, there you can find regions where it's very anti-military or against the army.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's one of those like weird things where we have history and we've grown up as children being taught in Germany that the military does horrible things like start wars, and then we sort of live in this illusion thinking that we could somehow live in a country where we don't need our own security, our own protection. And I think the last 6 months have shown that that's not a world that we live in, right?
Yeah, things are changing.
No, it is really, and it's sort of weird because I think I grew up very much with this mindset that I mean, I didn't do my mandatory Bundeswehr where I did Zivildienst, and I was very much in this mindset of like, yeah, this is not something that we need, never really extrapolating and thinking through the consequences of like, oh, if we completely would abandon all of this, is that something that what are the downstream consequences, if you will, right? Well, let's go back to trail running. You live in Bavaria. You live in the foothills of the Alps, or more or less right in the Alps. What gets you then from the normal hiking and mountaineering, sort of seeing the mountains in the traditional sense of what you do, to, hey, I should run this thing?
Yes, I came from this hiking background, and at the beginning of my trail running passion, it was around 2011. I figured out that hiking is nice, but that you also that you can also do longer hikes in a very compressed time. So doing a 2 or 3 day hike in one day. And that was a great experience. And then I figured out, okay, there are also some parts during the hike where you can run. So I started to run the downhills and the flat sections. Then I started to run uphill, and so from the hiking background, I came over to trail running, and I met some great people here in the area who were trail runner before, and yeah, they introduced me into this great sport.
Is that it? For me, I think that's a very interesting and very typical path for a German, because Germans grow up hiking as part of their family's summer vacations.
Yeah.
And if you're young, you might have always sort of run the downhills because you wanted to go down to get your ice cream or something, right? I mean, so if when you're young, you always try to be fast, but you don't really consider that to be a sport or something that you do. And just in the last few years, that have sort of, you know, it's sprung up as a sport that people do. Did you get first introduced as a way of, hey, there's a race, and perhaps if I'll train, I'll enter that race? Or was it more of, oh, this is just a fun activity that I can do, and as you're saying, I can do longer things, longer tours faster?
Yeah, at first, the first year, it was just a fun activity. So I was running through the mountains, over the trails, and after 1 year, I signed up for my first race, just to get know what kind of race is it, what's the what's the experience I can get there, and it was just a try. I thought, let's give it a try, to put on a bib and towing the lines and the starting line, and see what's happened.
So when was your first race? Do you remember?
It was 2012 in June. It was the Zugspitz Ultra. Not the long...
So you immediately did a very big race.
Yes.
Did you do the big distance, or did you just do
I did
the big event?
The middle distance, 62 or 68 kilometers. So not the 100K. What's the main distance at this event? But at this time, it was the biggest event, and it's still the biggest trail running event in Germany. And I thought that's a good event to get to know everything, because it's well organized and everything is clear, and they have the experience over the years. And I thought that's a good start to get to know the scene.
And for American listeners who don't know the Zugspitz, the Zugspitz is Germany's highest mountain, but it's not entirely in Germany. So it does have, and half the mountain is in Austria. Am I correct?
Yes, that's right.
And the race, is it similar to the UTMB that it is a circumnavigation of the mountain?
Yes, it circumnavigates the mountain with on the 100K track, and on this 68 or 62 track we started somewhere around the half and just circumnavigated the half of the mountain.
This is very fascinating. I would like to make a list of races in Europe that are sort of modeled similar to UTMB, where they are circumnavigations of big peaks, right? Because that would be sort of fun, and that's something that is doable in the Alps from a permitting and logistic point of view, where in here in North America it's always a little tricky trying to find a good route where you can get permits with wilderness areas and stuff. And so that's very cool. So Zugspitz Trail, and you're saying it was a good introduction to trail racing because it was a big race and it's well managed. But that is also then a very unique way of experiencing trail racing, because trail racing can also be 30 people at the end of a dirt road and very low key, right? And you have to sort of bring all of your own stuff, right? And Zugspitz Trail is sort of the very opposite: sponsors and big finish line arch and music and stuff, right?
Yeah. A lot of entertainment, so like the UTMB.
Yeah, exactly. Would you say this is then the type of race that you favor, that you enjoy more, or how do you feel about sort of these sort of community races in terms of for you signing up?
I think it's a good way to start. But if I have the chance to take part, to participate in such a big event or a smaller event, like as you said, a community run organized by just a small crew starting at a dirt road and very low key, then I think I would prefer the low key race.
Okay. Which is interesting because you're wearing, which is our listeners don't see that, you're wearing the Lavardo shirt, which is... So, and looking at your history, you were actually running quite a few of the really big races. So you yourself, do you sign up for the other ones too? Do you run lots of races and now the little community runs in between? Or do you feel like by now I have so much experience, so now I'm running all the big ones?
I'm running the big ones because I want to get my qualifying races for Western States. And my big lifetime goal is to participate in Western States 100, and so I have to run such a big race every year. And yes, the Lavardo is very very close to here. It's a 3-hour drive. Next one is Großglockner. It was last weekend. I didn't race there, but that's also a big race qualifier for Western States, and Zugspitz also. So I have to run one of these 3 or 4 races around my neighborhood to get my yearly qualifier.
Okay. So we'll come back to your dream of running Western States in a minute. That's very fascinating. But we need to sort of chronologically roll this up. So you've run Zugspitz Trail as your first trail race, and you get a taste for it, and you're hooked. You're like, okay, this is amazing. This is my sport now.
Yes, because running races is very nice because you don't need to take care of your nutrition and the navigation because everything is organized. And it's a good way to have a nice day out in the mountains with some people and just running and chatting and don't taking care about all this logistical stuff. So I really like racing, not that much. I think 3 or 4 races a year should be enough for me, but it's very nice. I really like it.
It is very nice, right? I think adventures are cool and they're different because you have to if you like the planning and looking over the maps and making your own route, right? I mean, there is something really special about that, but there is something so convenient about being able to saying, let me explore an area that I've never been to, and I do so by just signing up for a race, and then everything is taken care of me.
Yeah, that's right.
For me. And that's in a sense how you signed up for Squamish, right? How did you hear about Squamish? Well, this is interesting because I've raced Squamish too, and this is sort of a theme here on the show that I somehow end up with lots of people who've run Squamish. So you know you live in Bavaria. How did you find out about Squamish?
It's very funny. It was at the beginning of 2013, yes. And I was on a military training, and it was relatively clear that there is a spot for vacation in August 2013.
Okay.
And one day in January, um, on my Twitter account, Squamish50 follows me. And I thought, I get the notification, Squamish50 is following you on Twitter. And I thought, oh, what's Squamish50? What's that? And I saw, hey, that's a race in Canada. That sounds great. And I checked it out, and the race was scheduled for August. And I said, hey, that's also great. I have no race for 2013. August is just a vacation time. So let's give it a try. And I asked a friend if he wants to join me. And so I signed up for Squamish50, and we made a trip over to Canada for 3 weeks.
So I need to take this clip and I need to send it to Gary Robbins and the social media team at Squamish, because they will be very excited to hear that all of their marketing efforts paid off. This is fantastic. Squamish50 follows me. I should do that race. I like it. So, I mean, at this point, obviously you've done your research, so you know where Squamish is. Have you ever been prior to North America before?
No, that was the first time.
Okay, I like it. And so you're like, well, you look at the website and you're like, okay, that seems like a race where I can, because, and the reason why I'm saying this is because when you commit to the entry fee, that's easy when you do international races. That becomes the least expensive thing, right? But you're committing to tickets, hotel, right? I mean, it becomes a big lift. And at this point, you don't know if this race is going to be. In 2013, that was one of the first Squamish races, right?
The second one, I think.
The second or so, right? So it didn't have that that clout, if you will, right? That people now everybody knows that Squamish is one of the best run races in North America, right? But back then, that was a little bit more of a risk.
Yeah, that's right. But yeah, we thought, okay, let's give it a try. Canada is great. We saw pictures from Squamish and Whistler and all British Columbia and all this area and Vancouver. I thought, okay, let's spend 3 weeks over the big sea and see what happens.
I like it. All right, so you sign up in January, you run Squamish, and well, distance fine. You're doing well. Can you remember what sort of your first impressions were, how a race in North America in Canada is different to Zugspitz, to the European run races?
Yes.
This is one of the big topics that I want to talk about.
Yes.
And I'm curious how we can sort of like start weaving that into the conversation.
First of all, you have no mandatory equipment. And I really like that approach, giving the runners more self-reliance. And they still have no mandatory equipment nowadays, just a headlamp for the first 10K. And I really like that approach because I'm old enough. I know everything, and I think I'm old enough and experienced enough to know what I need to put in my backpack and how much water I need and if I need gloves or a hat or a waterproof jacket and all. And I like this approach. Compared to Germany or other races in Europe, you have a big list of mandatory equipment. Often you take this stuff in your backpack because you figure out, okay, it's a race up to 3,000 meters, or the weather forecast is very bad, so I need a hat, I need gloves and all this stuff. But sometimes there are situations, just like the end of June, I ran Mozart 100 in Salzburg, and it was one of the warmest weekends in June, and we had 35 degrees, and mandatory equipment was still a hat and gloves. And I wrote to the guys from the race and asked them, hey, it's Thursday and the race is on Saturday, and the forecast looks pretty awesome, 34 degrees. So would it be possible to put the hat and the gloves out of the mandatory equipment? And I've got no reply to this answer. So
So
yeah,
that's a very interesting and practical first point, and we sort of need to reverse it. So you say in European races you've got mandatory equipment, and is this being checked then too? Like, do people do bag checks?
it depends. Sometimes in the starting area you have the back checks. Oh, just yeah, they want to see the mobile phone or just one item from the mandatory list. Sometimes they check it at the finish line, or sometimes
Okay.
during the race. But I only had checks during the starting process in the starting area, not during the race
Yeah,
or
yeah.
at the finish line.
And would you say that there are certain races? I mean, if you run UTMB, a certain amount of mandatory equipment might be justifiable because of the difficulty in
Yes.
terrain and the elevation, and just the length of and how long you were out there. But Mozart is a fairly tame race compared. It's not really a mountain race in that regard, right?
Yeah,
And
that's right.
so
Yeah.
do you think that this sort of over eagerness to have mandatory equipment comes from the fact that UTMB sort of established this in Europe, and so now everybody just follows suit?
Maybe. I don't know. I would prefer if they call it recommend equipment and say, okay, I'm the race organizer. If I run this race, I would take these items in my backpack. So please follow our list of recommend items.
Yeah, yeah.
That would be
No,
great.
that would make sense. Do you think, and I'm a race director myself, do you think that this could have something to do with the insurance requiring it or the permit that the local jurisdiction is sort of putting on? Or do you think it's just sort of laziness on the race directors that they're saying, yeah, we're just requiring it if you like it or not?
So if you compare it to the US, where you have situations and processes on the court where people get charged for just nothing, I would say that normally the regulations should be harder in the US than in Europe. But if you compare
Hmm.
it, then the
Hmm.
regulations in the US
Okay.
were much lower than the regulations in Europe for running such races. So I don't know, what is it,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
a problem by the organizer, or is it just our law? I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting because Western states started off with very interesting requirements,
Yeah,
right? They had these weight checks at every aid station because they were medically freaking out about what running 100 miles through the desert would do to you, or through the heat, and they've eased up on this, right? So one thing that's very different, though, then is, and it's not a requirement either, is that in US races, especially the big races, increasingly you have pacers and you have a crew that helps you. And that then creates sort of almost this additional
yeah,
safety barrier for the runner and the race director, that they're saying, oh, yeah, all these racers, they're going to they have all this help and support anyway, right?
yeah.
Especially in the night when it gets dark or whatever, right? Wherein in Europe you don't have pacers at all.
That's right. Yeah, and I also think that you have more aid stations during a race in the US than in Europe.
Oh, interesting. I think that depends a little bit on the race. I would say, what would you say is the average different mileage or kilometer span between aid stations
Uh,
in Europe? Do
10,
you
10 to 15 kilometers. Yeah.
kilometers? I would say that is probably on par.
Okay.
I think every 5 miles or so would probably be similar. So you run Squamish, you fall in love, and you come back over and over and
Yes,
over
that's
again,
right.
right? I mean, you've done it several times. So when you're out there in Squamish, are you then also like going up to Whistler and enjoying Vancouver? So you're obviously adding some
Yes,
vacation
that's
to
right.
it.
And our group is was getting bigger and bigger. So we started with a group of two, me and a friend. The year after, 2014, we're still two, but 2016 we were a group of three, combining Squamish with the Rut. In 2017, we were a group of five, and in 2019, running Whistler Alpine Meadows, also Gary Robbins race up in Whistler, we were a group of, I think, 10.
Nice. So you're like the local evangelist for
Yeah.
Gary Robbins races. So you have to tell a little bit. So you're coming back. What do you tell people? What that they should come with you? What are the things that you're telling them? You're saying you have to join me next year in
Yeah,
Squamish or Whistler. What
it's
are
the
the things you're
atmosphere
telling them?
and also the race director. So it's very familiar, I think. So running a race in the US or in Canada is so much, yeah, so much. You can't compare it with running a race in Europe, I think. So in 2016, I had a very good day running the Squamish 50K, and I think I placed 25th or something else. And there's this long climb up to Galactic Scheiße, this mountain bike trail,
Hmm.
and I've passed a lot of runners during this uphill, and every time I passed a runner, they said, "Hey, you're looking great, great job, come on, you can do it," and that was a situation I didn't know from German races or other races in Europe. If you pass a runner in Europe or in Germany, most of the time they just say, "Oh, hey, hey," or they do
Servus.
servus, no, and they don't. Sometimes they don't give you enough space to pass, so you have to wait until you have the chance to pass. And in Squamish, they stop and make a step by the side so that you can pass them. If you reach out to the aid stations, that's just awesome. So you talk to the guys at the aid stations and thanks for being out there, thanks for everything, thanks for your help. That's also a situation I didn't know from other races. If you run Lavardo, the people are coming to the aid station and rah, and eating and drinking and and running on and no conversation, no thank you or yeah. So that was great.
So that's very interesting, and it's a very interesting perspective. I've just interviewed an American who ran Lavardo, and she too sort of commented on the fact that in Europe you don't really talk during the races, and over here it is very common that if you overtake someone, or you might even find yourself running with someone that you've never met, but you sort of find yourself in the same
Yep.
speed, and you just get to know them, and you might talk for a while about whatever, right? Your favorite movies or so. So you saying that this doesn't exist in Europe. Do you have an idea why not? Is it overly competitive? Is it culturally? What do you think the reason for that
Maybe it's
is?
partly over competitive and partly culturally, but I don't really know.
Yeah. I experienced it at Monte Rosa last year too, that I was a little bit taken back that every runner that I've sort of run with or passed or was passed by, I've always tried to be super friendly, but I was always confused because I didn't know what language they would speak. So I didn't know, should I say hi in German? Should I say it in English? Right? And so I was wondering if that could be a reason that people might not know what language should be the one to speak, right? And if you're already fighting, trying to climb up that hill, and then you can't speak your main language, you might be extra grumpy by yourself. Like, I don't know what to say. I mean, this is a super fascinating sort of flipped perspective, because I often interview people, Americans who go to Europe and have a great time over there, and to sort of have a German saying, "No, actually, I have a great time coming over here. I enjoy the atmosphere and races, the friendliness." Um, I mean, in part, it could have something to do that the productions are just too big. There are just too many volunteers. Right? It's too hard to manage it all, but it's not hard to be friendly, right? I mean, you'd think that would be something that would be possible.
And also the finish line, for example, at the Squamish 50. So Gary is waiting for every runner and give him hugs and all this stuff. And in Germany, there's just a volunteer who handing over the medal and say, "Thanks for running. Take a beer. Goodbye."
I mean, this goes obviously beyond the cultural aspect, and that's what makes Gary Robbins, that he has a very serious focus on keeping his races, who are growing bigger and bigger, very personal, and making himself very much still available, right? That he doesn't remove himself and saying, "Oh, I'm the celebrity now, so now nobody can touch me," right? That he is still at the finish line greeting everyone. I mean, that speaks to his character and to the kind of organization that he's building it in a way that he doesn't get pulled away having to do more important things. So,
we have also some races in Germany and Austria with a similar approach, where also the organizers are waiting in the finish area, and we have a party after the race. And these races are also, compared to the big ones, are small races with 400 or 500 participants, but they're sold out immediately. And I think that shows that the people don't need this big races with all the entertainment. So the people want maybe low-key races, smaller races with more familiar.
Yeah. Well, and what's great about this is that our sport is such that this can still exist. That we've not come to a place that the only place where you can run a race and really be in the mountains and be on the trails is by signing up to these big races. That if you don't, unless you need qualifiers for Western states, you very much could find environments, experiences where you sign up with your friends, where you run the trails that you love in exactly the kind of atmosphere, right? So, and I think that's sort of the beauty of our sport, that we have this really broad. You can run UTMB and do the full circus of everything, right? Production and celebrity runners, or you can just run with in your favorite location with your favorite race director, if you will, right? Because in many ways, that's what brings people then back to Gary Robbins with races is that he is there, that his presence sort of creates this atmosphere, right?
And at the end, it's always your own decision. So coming back to the mandatory stuff, so I read the rules of the race and see, okay, if I want to run this race, I need to put all these items in my backpack. Is this, do I really want to run this race, or is it just, and so I can decide by my own, okay, yes, I taking part in this race, I follow the rules, and I take all the stuff with me, and I ran the race over and out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's why for me, where I've run, I organize some small races. Organized last week the Beast of Big Creek, and it's just up and down a mountain with 100 runners, very small. But I've went through the extra hoops to get it registered as a UTMB index race, so that somebody who says, well, I like the atmosphere of the local races, but I'm still have that big goal, that you can run a little race and still sort of are on track to get your points or whatever, right? All right, well, tell me a little bit about Whistler Alpine Meadow. That's a race that I've always wanted to run. I've ran Squamish twice, and I've not made it up to Whistler, partially because I've always run Squamish in August, as you say, and I've always taken the family up with me, and we've always made vacation around it, and then we went up to Whistler a few days afterwards to just hang out and play. And with Whistler Alpine Meadow being in September, I've not been able to make up the track. You've ran it Tell me about Whistler Alpine Meadow.
Oh, it was my first 100-miler.
Okay, you did a 100-mile on top
Yes.
of it. Whoa, yes.
And it was a great experience. So I divided the race in 4 parts, so four marathons, and just running from marathon to marathon. And the course, I think, is very challenging because you run up. I think it was Blackcomb Mountain, where in the ski area. Then you run down Blackcomb Mountain on the other side. It was I think it was a mountain bike track because we had these wooden bridges and these big gaps where we have to climb down, running down to Whistler Valley, and then we have to turn around and run back the mountain again. So the same way we descending, we are now ascending the mountain, and this was, a little bit brain fuck. Reaching the mountain, and then you have to run down back to Whistler Village, and I think it was the last 10K you're running through forest next to the finish line area, and a lot of most time of the last 10K you can hear the finish line speaker, and so you're running a 100-mile race, and after mile 93 you just hear the sounds from the finish line area, but you still have to run 7 miles to come to the finish line. And at the end the forest was looking, I felt like running in circles and don't get out of this shitty forest. But I made it. I don't know how. I made it, and at the end, the watch clocked with 170 kilometers, so 10 kilometers more than the 100 miles, so 5.5 miles extra on top. And yes, that's also part of the Gary Robbins races, I think.
Yes, and I know a little bit of the backstory with Whistler is that he wanted a 100-mile race, and he had an original course in Whistler that went, is it north of the highway that goes through, right? And there are too many bears over there, and it was hard to get.
That was the grizzly problem.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think I love the location of having a big ultra event in Whistler, and I think it has potential to become as big of a race as UTMB and Lavardo, absolutely, right? Because the logistics are there, close to an airport and stuff. So I think it has really everything there. The problem is that he hasn't found the perfect route. Yeah. Like, it's not quite an iconic route yet because there've been so many shifts back and forth with permits and construction and weather and stuff. And so I think he's struggling trying to find the right place for it, but I think it has a huge potential.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So you did a Gary Robbins race as a first 100-miler. I mean, I don't know what to say because Gary Robbins races are notoriously tough.
That's right.
And he will say so unapologetically. He will say, okay, if you sign up for one of my races, then you will suffer. I will never forget in Squamish that last hill. That when you run the 50K or the 50 miler, you don't really pay attention to it on the elevation profile.
Mount of Flem.
Exactly, right? Because you've got these big climbs and you focus on these and you're like, okay, these are the ones you have to focus on. And then you're like within 10K of the finish, and then there comes this really, really stupid climb, and you're like, what is going on?
Yes.
This doesn't make any sense.
I was the course marshal on top for 2 times, I think 2014 and 16. I was course marshaling up the Mount of Flem.
Oh,
yes,
yeah?
And I saw people dying coming up that last climb.
Yeah.
That was
crazy. I think the first time no, I think the second time where I knew what I was expecting. I come around the corner just before the climb, and a runner is sitting on the ground, and she's like, I can't do it. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to sit down next to you. And so we had a nice little chat, and I was like, we can do this together. Come on, we can make this happen. Oh, yeah. Mountain of Flem. That is one evil hill at the end.
Yeah, that's right.
So we've talked about Gary's races. You've ran the Rut. How does the Rut then compare to Gary's races with your perspective of coming from Europe?
I think with the perspective coming from Europe, it's just similar. Um, okay, it's not Gary Robbins, it's Mike Footy, but uh, also great race, well organized, awesome volunteers, finish line emotions, after show, after race party. So everything I found in Squamish, I also found in Montana during the rut.
I mean, this is truly a fascinating perspective, because I sort of see myself a little bit as an ambassador, like promoting these European races, and now I'm interviewing someone from Europe who basically tells me that actually the American races are better. Now it is interesting. I don't really know how to frame this. Obviously, you are entitled to your perspective. I think that's what makes running great. I wanted to run a European race. I had the opportunity of running Monte Rosa last year, the 100K, and I was shocked how during the race, I mean, the aid station people were kind and friendly. It wasn't bad, but it very much felt like you were on your own. Nobody was cheering. Nobody really paid attention to you. You had to take care of yourself, right? And yeah, coming from races that I've experienced over here, and then, seeing the photos of people cheering in town at UTMB, and like, I expected something different, right? And so I was quite surprised how different it ended up actually being, how much I felt insular on my own, right? No, that's interesting. So, do you have anything on the horizon to come back? And obviously, COVID ruined travel for the last couple of years, but now that things are opening back up, are you coming back to to North America to run, or are you now patiently waiting for Western States to be the next goal?
The next big goal is Western States. Hopefully, I have a chance for next year's race. So I got now, I think, 16 tickets in the lottery for this year. So the chances are rising.
Yeah.
But Squamish is also an option to come back to race Squamish again, or Whistler. So Gary still has more races up in Whistler on this Whistler 100-mile weekend. He's doing the triple whammy, where you can run 3 races on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. That could be an option. And I'm also signing up for Leadville each year. And maybe I'm lucky enough to get a spot sometimes.
Okay. No, it is really interesting what races are known in Europe, because I mean, we have so many big races here in the country that on one side are big because they're established and well known and have been going on for a long time, and on the other side they're all reasonably small races when it comes to participants, right? I mean, Western States, only has 300 some runners. I mean, that's not really a big race in numbers compared to European races.
The problem is for my plannings that I want this Western States qualifier each year, and it's the easiest way for me to run this qualifier somewhere around in Germany or Austria or maybe Italy, and often these races are in June or July, and so I'm not able to run a race in America in June or July. So this, that could be a problem, or is a problem for my plannings, and so I'm not able to run one of these early races in America.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Perfect. Well, super. So you have to absolutely keep me informed if you are intending. Squamish sells out really quickly, but you have to inform me if you are coming back up to Whistler or Squamish, because I've been eyeing with running one of his races again too. So we might have to hook up there and connect and run a few miles together. But obviously, so let's talk a little bit about Western States. What's the fascination with running Western States for you? Yeah, tell me a little bit about what you see. I mean, obviously, I know what the historical significance is, but for you personally, what makes that such a race to put so much effort in?
Yeah, it's the first 100-mile race. Okay, that's the historical part, but I think I've seen all documentations on YouTube and all this other stuff, Billy Yang, Unbreakable, and everything on YouTube. And this race is fascinating me. It's not that technical like races in Europe. So it's mostly dirt road and more downhill than uphill. So not my not the terrain I mostly like, but I want to run this race.
Yeah,
it's a dream.
No, for sure, for sure. So for you, this is more of a dream to run Western States than it is to run UTMB.
Yes, absolutely.
Fascinating, right? Because I think I know a lot of people. Well, I know people who've run Western States or who've given up on trying to get into the lottery, but I know a lot of people for them that sort of dream out in the future is UTMB, right? 1 year, time in my life, I want to run a big European race, and for you, it's sort of the exact reverse. Yeah. That for you, that's sort of the classic race that is entirely different than what European races are, and has the history and has that a reputation of something worth running. Do you think you can handle the heat? That's what makes me nervous about Western States.
Normally I like running in the heat, so with some times before the race. So if I get into the race, then I would try to get 2 weeks prior to start over to the US to get know of the heat and checking out the course. So I think it's possible.
Yeah, you've experienced enough that you should be able to handle it. Make sure you bring a crew with you. That seems to be a big success at Western States. Well, fantastic. Well, I think it's easy to find some Germans who are wanting to have some vacation in California, right?
Absolutely.
If you tell Germans vacation in California, they're like, sign me up right here. I'm going. Well, that's amazing. So 16 tickets in the lottery. That seems like a good chance that either this or next year you'll get in. That is, and Leadville would that be an alternative to Western States, or would that be just a Western States qualifier?
No, it's an alternative to Western States.
Okay.
So the good thing is that the Leadville lottery is still after Western States lottery, and if I didn't get a spot in the lottery, then I put my name in the hat for Leadville.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Fantastic. So, what do you think about Hard Rock? Too hard to get into, or
too hard to get into, and too hard to get a qualifier?
Oh, okay.
So I think I still have no qualifier for Hard Rock. If I have
not
one,
even,
then I would give it a try.
Yeah, not even Lavardo.
I don't think so.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. Well, fascinating. It's super interesting to hear a perspective from somebody who lives in Europe, has these races that I find phenomenal, dream races, sort of in their neighborhood, and you turn it around and you dream about races over here, and where I think you're like, oh yeah, Squamish, it's like right up the street for me, and you're like, Squamish, this is the magical place for me. Amazing. All right, let's talk a little bit about something that you sent me that I thought was very interesting, which is you wrote a book.
Yes.
Tell me about the book.
We were a group of 3. An older couple from a neighborhood and me, we wrote a book about trail running in our backyard. Um, yes, it's a guide with 40 routes inside for the beginners and the medium athletes and the pros, starting with 5K and a little bit hilly, ending up with 50K and 2,800 meters of vertical gain. So we want to show the people our backyard and the possibilities to run in our backyard. And
Fantastic.
it was you don't get rich by writing a book, even if you're Stephen King or or J.K. Rowling. But it was just me. It was a lifetime goal, and so we write it in.
How did you get it published?
It's self-published, so the couple have the ability to publish this by their own, and it was also available in local bookstores and on Amazon. But now I think it's too old and you can't get any more copies. So we printed.
Oh, that's a bummer. What
think,
was it? What is it called?
Landschaftsläufe und Trailruns im Berchtesgadener Land.
Oh, that's
so
genial.
I think we produced 800 or 1,000 pieces, and now they're all sold out.
Well, there you go. That's cool. I love it. I self-published a book on trail running here in Olympia, where I sort of covered all the local trails and made some suggestions of something very similar. And it's also self-published, and it just was a passion project. So I love these stories because, yeah, these kind of routes, they are there, and some of them change, and some of them need to be revisited, right? I mean, I think if you would do it again a few years later, you would perhaps do it a little different or include other things and stuff, right? And obviously, with today's internet and everything available in an app, a book isn't really that valuable
that's right,
and essential anymore, right?
Yeah.
But it's still cool to have done and produced and sort of send out into the world.
Yeah, that's right.
Fantastic. Steve, do you want to tell my listeners a little bit about where they can connect with you in terms of social channels, websites, and stuff? We put all these links in the show notes for people to follow up, but just so that they know where they can reach out and find you.
Yes, you can find me on Instagram. The nickname is Up to the Top. There you can find me also on Twitter, and I've got a Facebook page. But all this social media stuff is, not a priority at the moment. So I post some pictures and stuff, but not regularly. I've got a YouTube channel. I think it's also Up to the Top, where you can find shoe reviews and also some race reports, films which I produce during my races. I've got a homepage and blog, but with no new content. I think the last blog post was half a year ago, but it's also up
That's
to
still
the
pretty
top,
good.
up to the top.
yeah.
.de, and you can find me on Strava. It's Steve Auch, where you can follow my runs.
That's awesome. It's going to be especially interesting when we see that you are training again for Squamish or Whistler. Or perhaps you get lucky. When is the Western States Lottery?
I think it's the first Saturday of December.
So that's around the same time when Squamish opens.
Yes.
So you can... So you would know potentially if you make it into Western, and if you're not, you would sign up for Squamish or Whistler, right?
Maybe.
Maybe. We'll see. Okay.
I have to talk to my wife first.
Oh, there we go. Do we have it in the budget to go back to Canada again?
Yes. But she was there and she was fascinated, so I think that should be no problem.
Yeah. I mean, it is a beautiful place.
Yes, but our son is still 1 year old, and I don't want to take him on such a long flight. So maybe we have to wait.
There is sort of a tricky time when I think below 1 year old you can handle it, right? You can sort of like just hold him and keep him quiet. We traveled to Germany with our son when he was just a year old, and that worked. But then there sort of like 2 or 3 years when you really don't want to fly with a kid for long distances.
Yeah.
And then when they get a little older, it gets better. You just turn on the movies on the
that's right.
on the screen in
system,
front of
and
exactly, and then they're good for 8 hours. Just make sure you feed enough stuff. Amazing, Steve. Thank you so much for coming on Singletrack and sharing your sort of unique and special and reverse perspective on trail running from Europe and giving your perspective on North American races. I think that was super fascinating. Now go back, relax, and recover.
Yes.
And we'll see you online.
Yes, thank you very much, Matthias.